Hymns House, episode 10. I'm Jonathan Stern. As always, I'm here with Lewis Stevens and Dr. H. I'm also here with a very special guest, Sekander Amini, a pharmacist from the UK. Sekander was born and raised in the UK. He's been a pharmacist for the past 5 years and an investor in hymns for 4 years since late 2020. He's worked in both public health care for the National Health Service and in private health care. And notably, his investment in HIMSS 4 years ago enabled him to open up his own private pharmacy. And this part comes straight from him, has further strengthened his conviction in his HIMSS investment. Sekander, we are thrilled to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
To kick things off, tell us, what is your day-to-day like at the pharmacy, and how has running the private pharmacy strengthened your conviction in your investment?
So in my private pharmacy, we deal with high-end clients, so wealthy clients in London. And we have partnered up with doctors in London, private doctors. So these patients see their doctor, and then the doctor sends the prescription directly to my pharmacy. I kind of copied this part from HIMSS. We offer like a concierge service. We contact the patient and offer them to get their medication delivered directly to their house, or if they want to pick it up from our late night pharmacy, so they have that flexibility. The prescriptions that we receive mostly comprise of hormonal medication. I watched the menopause episode that you guys posted yesterday. I would say maybe around 50 to 40% of our revenue comes from menopause and hormones, testosterone, etc. Next would be mental health. These are all categories that HIMSS also operates in. So mental health probably makes up around 20% of our revenue. Weight loss is picking up. Before it was around 10%. Now I would say it's around 15 to 20 because it's still quite expensive. And also dermatology. So the revenue that generates in our pharmacy comes from the same categories that HIMSS operates in. And these high-end clients, this is like the high end of healthcare in the UK. These prescriptions that we get comprise of multiple tablets. I'll give you an example. So a typical prescription will consist of this utrogestan, which is progesterone, menopause medication, this estradiol, something like this, which is low dose testosterone gel for females, and something like this. So a patient will end up having to take all of this, sometimes even more. And even though this is the high end of healthcare in the UK, there will still be issues with adherence because these patients sometimes will forget to take one tablet. They may forget, if they're going on holiday, they may forget to take it with them. They have to apply multiple creams. This results in low adherence. And this is why I'm bullish on HIMSS, because they get to compound these ingredients all together, making it easier for the patient to take it.
Thinking back 4 years when you initially invested in HIMSS,
Mhm,
is the compounding what got you excited then? Tell us about what initially piqued your
mhm.
interest.
So I started looking into HIMSS late 2020. It was still a SPAC. And back then, they weren't really into compounding. They had just launched in their compounding of dermatology creams, which did spark my interest. But back then, it was mostly like generic pills. What sparked my interest is the price transparency of the medication, and also how easy it is to treat such conditions. For example, here in the UK, a condition like ED, something that him started with, if you go to the doctor, they wouldn't, if you're a young male, say for example, in your 20s and 30s or even 40s, the doctor may not prescribe you sildenafil or tadalafil because they would rather prescribe that to someone who's older, because in the UK, we have free healthcare, right? And obviously, it's not unlimited medication, there's a budget. So they prioritize older patients. So someone in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who's suffering from ED would have to come into the pharmacy and even thinking about, okay, a patient is suffering with ED. They need to come in with people behind them asking for Viagra or Cialis. And I could tell the patient's face would, they'll usually be quite embarrassed asking for it. So that's one barrier to entry. The first hurdle would be building up the courage to ask to get this medication. So in my head, I was thinking, Hims is offering this from the comfort of your own home, where you could just message the doctor using the app or the website. That's what initially got me interested. And also the price saving. So first of all, it makes treating these conditions even easier for the patient, but also cheaper. For example, this Viagra pack of 4 tablets costs around, I mean, we sell it around £30. In dollars, I'm not sure, probably around $38-ish. I'm not sure about the conversion, $38 for 4 tablets. And Hims was selling, I believe per tablet was like £1 to £2 per tablet. So that's a huge cost saving. The patient's not embarrassed. And also back then they weren't doing compounded customized. Now they're doing compounded stuff where they're combining something like sildenafil with statins.
So
Dr.
Ken, you
H,
mentioned a couple of yeah.
how does that compare to your experience, particularly, as you were learning about Hims and getting excited about it yourself a few years ago?
Yeah, I think there's similar thesis points there. The initial excitement was just a new modality and way of delivering healthcare to deliver greater access to care, going online, taking away those barriers that Sekander mentioned, going to the doctor. All those are roadblocks, but also specifically now you're introducing special compound medicines and personalized medicines that, as he alluded to, it really takes away some of the burden of remembering to take medicines when you're on, as he showed an example for menopausal care. If you're on 3 or 4 or 5 different medicines, the adherence and compliance can go way down when you introduce multiple medicines. But if you can compound 2 of them or 3 of them to 1, your adherence to the treatment plan goes way up. So that was like the second level of excitement for me, was all of a sudden, not only are you doing a greater good and providing access to care, but now you're making it easier for people to get the proper amount of care too. So I think overall, pretty similar things that got us into this company.
The one thing that really stood out to me, Sekander, from everything that you shared was that you are supplying a premium experience, and
Mm-hmm.
you see that in Hims. And one of my takes in the past, we've compared Hims to Uber in the sense that both Uber and Hims have vertically integrated the experiences in their respective industries. The vertically integrated the points on the value chain of the experience in their respective industries. But what I've always thought was that Uber is a premium offering. Though Uber is less expensive than the traditional taxi system, it is a far superior offering. It's like technological luxury. Like, it's awesome. The experience is far superior, and it is specifically premium. So I thought those ideas were really interesting. I think people lose sight of the fact, they talk about Hims and Hers Health as quote unquote a boner pill or hair loss drug or whatever. There's been some unsavory characterizations of our Hims and Hers Health here, but I think that it should be seen as this premium offering that's very difficult to execute. And so I appreciate your thoughts. And if you have anything more to share in that vein, I'd love to hear your take there.
That's a great comparison you made with Uber, because with the healthcare offerings available right now, even the premium ones, once you see the doctor and you get your medication, they just leave you be, like, until your next visit, which is usually 3 months after. With Hims, you have an app which allows you to track your medications, track your progress, message anyone at any time to get any further information about side effects or etc. But even here in the pharmacy that we offer, once the doctor sees the patient and they get the medication from us, if they have any questions, they're kind of left to, I don't know, check Google or chat GPT. And one other thing, from the outside, people would just say Hims just offers, their online pharmacy, but they're not looking at the UI and on the app and the software that's available with it. Because there are other companies online offering finasteride or sildenafil, but they don't come with a platform with a software on the app where you get to track it, where you get to speak to someone about it.
I think we hear that quite a bit from people who critique the Hims business model. They're always like, there's no moat, there's no moat.
Mm-hmm.
What's stopping anyone from offering these generic medicines for 40% less cost? And we've all talked about this on previous podcasts, how we think Hims is not just a online healthcare platform slash pharmacy, but also a whole technology company. It's a data-driven tech company that's involved in healthcare. So that kind of goes along with what your impression is, using, a very nice UI UX platform app to integrate the whole process of, seeing a doctor and getting your medicine.
And another thing, most people who haven't looked into the company properly, they don't realize that Hims has slowly been improving their product. So, of course, any company, pharmacy could start offering generic pills online. But one of Andrew Dudon's interviews back in the day, like I've still got my hairline, but he convinced me to start using their products to prevent me losing it. And I thought it would be good to, as an investor, to see what the consumer experience is like. So I ordered the minoxidil and finasteride. It was like the serum. So it was good because, let me see if I have the medication here. Okay.
This was purely as a preventative. I mean, you have
Preventative. Yeah. Oh, because it runs in my family, my uncles and my father, they've got like a receding hairline. So I thought I would prevent it. So this is what's available. Look how bad the packaging looks. So imagine I'm 28. So imagine a guy, I'm trying to put myself on other consumers' shoes, a 20-year-old, taking a box like this, and imagine this on your bedside table. You just kind of feel embarrassed about it, like taking this sort of medication. But this is what Hims offered. It's more premium, it's discreet, and it's chewable as well. I'm going to get to the differences in a second. But what I liked about the serum was, traditionally, finasteride comes as a tablet and minoxidil comes as a foam. So I'm thinking, we all have busy lives. Who has time in the morning to, rub in the foam and then take the pill? We want something easy. So what Hims done, they combine two ingredients into one as a topical serum. And Dr. H may attest to this, that topical finasteride has lower side effects than oral finasteride. Some people experience ED, sexual dysfunction, but with topical, it's less. So I liked that fact as well, that it comes with less side effects. But it wasn't a perfect product, I'll be honest. One, it had a very strong medicine sort of smell. And another thing I realized, so when I put the serum in my hair in the morning, it was like a clearish serum. But when it dried up, it kind of left the white marks, which looked like dandruff, which did put me off initially. That's why my adherence wasn't 100%, I would say probably 80%, 70%. And then their next product was, if you guys recall, it was the spray version. So it was the same ingredients, finasteride and minoxidil, but it was like a fine mist. So it didn't have all this residue. It didn't leave white flakes. And it actually smelled like hairspray. So I was like, wait, this is a better product. Even though from the outside, it looks like finasteride and minoxidil, which so many of the pharmacies are offering, it was a superior product. So my adherence increased probably from 80% to 90% with the spray. Now with this one, I would say my adherence is close to, I'd say 98%. I've probably taken it every single day. It's the chewable, the blends. You guys have probably seen on their website. It's a chewable tablet, and I'll show you what it contains. So one pill of this, which comes in this, contains finasteride, and not 1 milligram. It's a specific dose, 1 point something milligram, to maximize efficacy and minimize side effects. So that one pill contains this, minoxidil, biotin, vitamin C, and it does contain other vitamin Bs, which I don't have in me right now. So imagine taking all of this compared to one single chewable pill. And that just increased my conviction even more, because I know all the bears that are talking about Hims, anyone could replicate it, but it's a superior product and they've been improving it slowly where people haven't really noticed. So I'm thinking this is only with one of their categories. So imagine all their other offerings.
Yeah, Sekander's description of his experience is spot on. This whole finasteride hair treatment was spread out over several years, and exactly what he said, we got a lot of feedback real time about the initial droplets. They were very hard to use, left the residue, as he mentioned, and, they took the feedback and invested more in product development. Next came the foam spray. I think that worked better for many patients. The other feedback we got with that was, the spray bottle was not working well. A lot of times it get clogged, and it was just kind of a mess. People weren't too happy about it. So it's really heartening to see that a company like Hims will, track and use feedback from their customers to further invest in money in, making better products. Basically, now, as you mentioned, this 4 and 5-in-1 tablet that replaces all the other stuff. I mean, it's really kind of cool seeing this whole journey from one single treatment modality.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the power of compounding for 9-10 episodes now. But Sekander, when you stacked those medications one on top of the other, on top of the third and fourth, and Hims is blending all of those into one, just the power of that really clicked for me as someone who's, I don't need to give the listeners my medical, but I'm not on much medication, really any medications. And taking 4 things a day, 5 things a day, 9 things a day, to only take 1 thing a day is a 10x better experience for millions of people. And it really clicked for me that moment. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, we have a special opportunity, given that you're in the UK, to hear a little bit more about the differences between the healthcare systems. You alluded to the fact earlier that healthcare is free in the UK, and yet you run a private pharmacy. Could you just offer a brief overview of the UK healthcare system, public versus private, how your operation fits in to that system, and then talk a little bit about how Hims fits in, because of course they do have a UK operation. Relatively, it's much smaller, but there are whispers that it may be ramping up soon.
Yeah, great question, Jonathan, because I've seen a few posts on X where people are saying the UK offers free healthcare. Why is Hims expanding there? Why would people pay for medication that they could get for free? But NHS is free in the UK, National Health Service. Some of the US audience may be aware of it because NHS struck a deal with Palantir, so it was in the investing news. NHS is free for all UK citizens, but if something is offered for free, think about it, it often gets abused. People who don't need to see the doctor, they go in for a smallest thing, a headache, a cough, etc. And what that does, it increases waiting times. So usually if you're going to see the doctor, we call them GPs here, so general practitioners, it's often like a 2 to 3 week wait. And they prioritize patients with chronic conditions which could lead to deteriorating health, such as diabetes, hypertension, those sorts of conditions. So they're prioritized. If it's someone that has acne on their face, they're not going to prioritize you. If it's someone suffering with ED or hair loss or all the things that Hims are covering, or weight loss, none of this, you're not prioritized. So you're left all the way at the back. And often when you go and see these doctors, they're not specialists, so they're general practitioners. They have an overview of general conditions, but they don't specialize in, say, acne or dermatology or sexual health. So they'll often prescribe you the wrong thing. Or another one is mental health. So a GP would prescribe you antidepressants, but they kind of guess which one works best for you. So what that leaves is people suffering with these conditions often go on living their lives without treating them. And obviously in the beginning, it may be fine, but over time, if someone's suffering from depression, if you don't get that treated, it may result into something worse. Or with hair loss, if you start receding from hair and if you don't treat it, before you know it, you're bald. Or if you have acne, because these are non-fatal conditions, people just leave it. So that's one end of the spectrum, NHS. The other end is private healthcare, which I'm in at the moment. But this is often too expensive for the general UK population. I'll give you an example. So an appointment with a doctor is around £100. I would say minimum. It's 100 to 150 to see the doctor. But there's still no price transparency with the medication, because when you see the doctor, you don't know what they're going to prescribe you. And often, once you see the doctor, they'll give you a prescription and you have to go to a pharmacy. You don't know, there's no transparency what they're going to charge you. And also, most people are working like 9 to 5s. You need to find time to see the doctor because the private doctor is not available 24/7. You need to take time off, see the doctor, then go to a pharmacy that's open, wait in line, and sometimes the pharmacy doesn't even have the medication. So you leave their prescription with them, they order it in, and it's just like, even this is private healthcare. You're paying for a premium for this sort of service, and it's still really bad. So what my pharmacy is doing is kind of copying Hims' business model, but we don't have the doctors in-house. So I've partnered up with the doctors. So the patient still needs to pay the doctor separately, and then they come to me for the medication, which isn't nowhere near as good as Hims' business model. But what I offer is like a late night service. So I'm open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I deliver to people's houses like Hims does. I do free delivery. But the medications are super high margin. That's why I could afford to do it. And that's why Hims has super high margins. For example, this is a common antidepressant, escitalopram, has 28 tablets in it, and it costs me around probably 70 pence, which is cents for you guys. And I sell it for £10. So that's a huge profit margin. And that's why if I get a multi-month prescription, like 4 or 5 months prescription, I could afford to do free delivery, etc. So in the UK, we have one end of the spectrum, free healthcare, which focuses mostly on chronic conditions like diabetes and hypertension, chronic conditions that could be fatal. And the other end of the spectrum is private healthcare, which is expensive, no price transparency. You're paying a premium, but you're not getting a premium service. So there's somewhere in the middle for the masses, people who, are working, they're not super wealthy, but have suffering from these sort of conditions that need an affordable private healthcare. And I think that's where the opportunity is in the UK. And the UK's population is nowhere near as big as America's. I think we have around 67 million, which is 20% of the US's population, but it's still a huge growth opportunity, I would say.
Sekander, from a legal standpoint, is
Mhm.
a UK citizen going to be able to easily jump in and out of the private system or like a HIM service? Because to my understanding, some countries around the world with a
Mhm.
universal healthcare system, they won't even allow you to do a private option. So would someone in the UK be able to use a HIM service while maintaining their public healthcare insurance or their private insurance?
Yeah, so in the UK, we don't really have healthcare insurance. It's free or private, which you pay out of pocket, but there's no legal issues where you don't even have to inform the NHS. I would say they'll probably actually be happy because NHS, the government is paying out of pocket. So if you're paying for a private service, they are saving money. So you don't need to inform anyone. You just go to a doctor or online pharmacy. So you need to be registered. There's something called the General Pharmaceutical Council. If you're registered with them and you have the license to practice, there's no issue, and you don't need to inform the NHS.
Are there already other telemed platforms in the UK that are existing right now and operating similar to what the HIMS is doing?
There are a few. I think does Newman operate in the US? Newman's?
Never heard of it.
So there's Newman and Manual. So I'll send you the link, Jonathan. Maybe you could share it with Lewis and Dr. H. They're kind of trying to copy the HIMS business model. But what distinguishes HIMS is they're offering the generic stuff, not compounded. It's like the finasteride pill or the Ozempic injection. It's nothing that HIMS is doing. It's the same active ingredient, but they're offering the generic versions. It's not customized. It's not personalized.
I just have a question about the UK population. Here in America, people are constantly complaining about the healthcare system. The system you described sounds far from perfect. That is the UK system. But what do people, the people you talk to on a daily basis, are they satisfied? Are they frustrated? What's the general sentiment?
Yeah, the UK healthcare system is an ongoing joke. No one's happy with it. Even though it's a free service, but the waiting times are very long and the doctor is overworked. So when you go and see the doctor, a few of my family members are GPs or general practitioners. They tell me they have a 10-minute window to see the patient. They just want to get them in and out the door as soon as possible. So you don't get that quality service. So yeah, most people aren't happy with it.
Room for an innovative company like HIMS to expand and make a dent in the system.
As I mentioned, there's two spectrums to the UK healthcare system, two extremes: free healthcare, expensive private healthcare. So HIMS is technically going to be private healthcare in the UK, but they're going to be affordable and a better service compared to the expensive private healthcare. So I think there definitely is a market in the UK for HIMS.
In the UK, are there specific specialized compounding pharmacies like there are here in the States? And are they also designated the same thing like 503A, 503B?
Mm.
And do they follow similar kind of regulations
Mhm.
as here in the United States?
Yes, there are two compounding pharmacies I'm aware of. There's Roseway Labs and PCCA. I'm not sure if they're 503A or 503B. However, the patient doesn't have direct contact with them. So when they see a doctor, then the doctor issues a prescription, then the doctor sends a prescription to these pharmacies that compound it and send it to the patient. So the patient doesn't get to order from them directly. And usually they'll have to pay the doctor separately and the medication separately, which turns out to be more expensive than something that HIMSS would offer, like a monthly subscription fee.
So, Sekander, you've been a part of
Yeah.
this thesis for the last 4 years or so.
Mhm.
One of the one of my central one of the central pillars of my bull thesis for HIMSS has been international expansion, specifically into Australia and the UK, where
Mhm.
I've perceived the healthcare system to have the flaws that you mentioned, i.e., very long wait times and just difficulty getting proper care. So, based on what you described, it seems like it's a home run for them to expand into the UK or into Australia. But like I said, you've been a part of the thesis for the last 4 years. I've been a part of the thesis roughly for the last 4 years, but we haven't seen that international expansion yet. It seems like it's
Mhm.
just too easy to expand internationally and offer people a fast pass in the healthcare system. So what do you think has prevented HIMSS from expanding into the UK or Australia so
Mhm.
far?
Yeah, great question, Lewis. I actually wondered the same thing because the HIMSS offerings in the UK are very limited right now. So when they first launched, they had, their ED medication or hair loss sprays or cream, which isn't medicated cream. It's just your normal like moisturizing creams, which aren't prescription. And they pretty much stayed the same. I mean, they had the serum and the spray and the pill, but they haven't expanded their offerings like no mental health, no weight loss. But they have changed the website. So they've been updating the website. But I want them to offer more stuff. But I've listened to practically all of Andrew Dudon's conference calls and his interviews. And he mentioned that the opportunity in the US is so big that they wanted to spend their marketing dollars there first. Because if they focused on expanding simultaneously in the UK and US, they may have stretched their budget too thin and it may have been too much. So I think Andrew Dudon mentioned he wants to establish the brand first in the US before international expansion. So I think that's the main reason why HIMSS hasn't expanded into the UK until now, because now they're profitable. There's less risk. Before they were unprofitable. So if they spend marketing dollars in the UK and money for expansion as well as the US, it may have eaten into the balance sheet, into the cash flow. There's no HERS offerings in the UK either
It's interesting.
yet.
So that pretty much aligns with the thesis that we've been building on this podcast. I'm not sure how many episodes you've listened to, but on last week's episode, we discussed the idea that HIMSS is being very measured about how it grows. I think it could have done what now with this conversation in mind and adding to, I think, last week's podcast. It could have expanded into weight loss. It could have been more aggressive with hers. I think it could also have expanded into the UK based on this discussion in 2022, but it's chosen to expand into these various categories and expand internationally in a much more measured way. For the hardcore listeners of this podcast and the HIMSS House homies and everybody, I think that all of these ideas are worth noting within the context of the financials and within the context of customer acquisition cost to new sub. Ultimately, that's the fulcrum of being bullish or bearish on HIMSS. Does that metric stay within an acceptable range? And I think that just describing the growth opportunities that are out there, such as in menopause and such as in international healthcare, where I have personally believed it's going to be, very easy to expand. And now it's great to hear somebody else who believes that as well. That's heartening in terms of those looking at this CAC to new sub number and wondering, is it going to double again next year? Is it going to double the year after? What exactly does that mean? But I think noting that there is runway for growth And there are different markets, different products that could continue to fuel growth, continue to give us easier subs. I think it's all worth noting.
You mentioned a good point. So Hims could have easily expanded into weight loss, menopause, all these conditions straight away, but I don't think they would have offered like a great product. It would have been the generic pills. And if a customer had a bad experience, they probably wouldn't use Hims and Hers again. So I think they're taking their time building the medication for these categories properly. And even I think it was 2 years ago, Andrew Duda mentioned weight loss. So it took them a year and a half to 2 years to finally roll it out. So that has me thinking, what other cancer categories are they working on under the hood right now?
In my mind, that segues into the idea that, the consensus, and you know this, you and Dr. H know this extraordinarily well, but the consensus within the medical community as to what is the most effective treatment or what treatments are even available, that evolves as regulatory, as R&D and, Novo Nordisk and all these companies evolve, and as the regulatory environment evolves. I think this is a really powerful conversation in the sense that it contextualizes where we're at. Where are we on the growth journey?
And so Hims has already rolled out into dermatology and ED and hair loss and mental health. But these categories are so big that I think there's a long runway of growth, as you mentioned, because there's so many people suffering from these conditions that don't know about the brand yet. And once they find out about Hims's premium offerings at a reasonable price, then I'm sure there would be a Hims customer.
I want to ask something real quick. We've talked about reasons to be bullish on Hims, and there are several. Is there anything that makes you concerned?
Concerned about Hims? So
Concerned about the future of the company? I don't know that we need to go through the laundry list of their theses, but just as you're thinking about Hims and Hers Health, like what keeps you up at night, if anything?
So I've thought about this a lot. So in the short term, we have the whole GLP-1 scare, but we all know that it's a small part of Hims's revenue. Another thing is obviously competition. So this comes up a lot about Amazon. But I'm thinking if Hims builds their brand and they're offering these premium products, then people would only move to Amazon who are really on a tight budget that need to save like $10, $20 here and there. But other than that, that's why I'm quite heavy on Hims. I don't see now they're profitable as well. I don't see anything that could ruin the company, if that makes sense.
The Amazon bear thesis is interesting. I think it is we've addressed it on this podcast. And, I think it's worth noting that the Amazon bear thesis exists. But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. One consideration is something that you mentioned earlier, which is the idea that just the Hims personalized medication is differentiated, right? And you stacked up all the finasteride, minoxidil, vitamin C, biotin. You stacked all those up and illustrated that they put this into one convenient, chewable product, and you shared that product with everybody earlier on this podcast. What thoughts came to my mind during that presentation was just the idea that is just one link on the chain of value for the entire offering. That is this vertically integrated general physician at national scale that leverages AI. I should have said AI orchestrated general physician at national scale, and soon hopefully international. But then another thing you mentioned was the general physicians or the general practitioners in the UK are tired and they have 10 minutes and they're using their intuition and their memory, and who knows if they're going to make the right decision. Is it a half gram of finasteride that's the right protocol? Is it 1.2 grams? Should this person be eating minoxidil? Should they be applying it to their scalp? And that's just one product, right? There's and then the psychiatric care is really important. But my point about all of this is that there's 2 points of differentiation in my mind that are somewhat obvious: is the differentiated products and then the use of AI to match the consumer with the right intervention or products.
The point you made about AI is a huge point because it's not talked about much. I think GLP-1s have been stealing the headlines with regards to Hims. I'll give you an example. So MedMatch, they initially launched it for mental health. Andrew Duda mentioned it. So with mental health, I'll go through the patient's experience through free healthcare and private. And I'll show you how HIMSS' offerings is a lot better. So with free healthcare, someone who's suffering from depression or anxiety, they go and see these general practitioners who aren't psychiatrists, but they know what to prescribe for what's first line, second line. But every individual is different. Certain medications may not work for that patient. And this is mental health we're talking about. So this happens often. My brother-in-law and my uncle, they're both GPs. So I have this conversation a lot with them. They tell me if someone comes in for depression or mental health, they just prescribe the first line. And often the patient won't agree with it. So they'll book a follow-up consultation saying, I feel like shit, I feel like rubbish. Can I try something else? So they need to wean them off that and put them on something else. It's like a trial and error thing that they're playing. But this is with someone's like neurochemical balance in their brain. So what HIMSS has done, so that was free healthcare. So with private, where you're paying to see a psychiatrist, which is a lot more expensive, we're talking £200 to £300 for an initial consultation. Even though you're paying a premium, they don't have AI. The doctor has, as you mentioned, they need to use their intuition. They may know a bit more. Okay, this medication might work for you, but often it doesn't. It doesn't work. So with MedMatch, I don't know how. I would love Andrew to give us more clarity on if it's improved patient outcomes. But MedMatch will help the psychiatrist or the doctor prescribe certain medications, reducing this whole process of trial and error with mental health.
Maybe Dr. H has some takes here. I don't mean to just keep going back and forth with you, but everything that you share with me resonates so much. That exact scenario has been my take on why I'm bullish on HIMSS psychiatric care. The trial and error aspect is very real. And in the United States, if you go to a general physician, your primary care physician, they'll do the same thing. They'll offer you they'll toss out whatever drug is top of mind. I guess it's a first, second, third line of defense or something like that. But the general physician will give you a psychiatric medication, but it's just he's going to be throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on in terms of trying to identify the right drug for you.
Yeah, generally speaking, the first medicine that comes to their mind is whatever they've prescribed the most and are most comfortable with. It may not necessarily be based on the patient's specific exact needs. I mean, if they're more experienced, then they have a little bit bigger toolkit to choose from. But generally speaking, it's what that specific doctor or nurse practitioner has been comfortable with for the past 5 years. And that's where I see the MedMatch coming in play is, HIMSS is gathering all these data points and they're able to gather information. Hey, this 40-year-old, 80% of 40-year-olds with these specific symptoms responded best to sertraline, or as a second line, the next one, they would respond probably best to escitalopram. So when you're introducing all these data points from a analytical standpoint, you have the ability as a provider to make the decision. Oh, initially I would have thought to do sertraline, but based on all the 10,000 patients in this data set, I might actually do this different medicine instead. So that's how I see MedMatch working for a platform like HIMSS, is to help guide the provider into choosing a better first or second choice.
Definitely. And one other thing that I see as a pharmacist, maybe other people can't, is there's a huge tailwind with mental health. As unfortunate as it sounds, since I've been a pharmacist since 2019, the demographic of patients, which is usually between teens, so 18 to mid 30s, for antidepressants has only been increasing. And so HIMSS is able to provide healthcare for these patients where they don't need to build up the courage to go and see the doctor and explain what they're going through. They could do this all online, so it makes it a lot easier for the patient to treat their mental health.
I think it is almost like a generational shift in how mental health is perceived through the generations. The stereotype is an older person or a boomer might be like, oh, there's no such thing as depression. Just suck it up and get through it. And I think with more awareness of how it's an actual medical condition, people of a younger and younger age now are able to have the insight and recognize their own ailments. And then second after that is actually be proactive and seek care for it. And that's where HIMSS helps in making it just a really easy way to access your care in a way that they can do it without feeling judged or anything like that. So I think it's an overall shift in sentiment over the years and generations.
That's a great point, Dr. H. And with these medications, you can't just come off it. So in terms of retention, these patients are going to be on it for a while, years maybe. And as maybe you guys have seen some of the reviews on HIMSS' app or whatever, some people give 1 star because you can't cancel it. You need to speak to someone. That's probably for their own good, because with these psychiatric medications, with these SSRIs, you can't come off them straight away. You need to be weaned off.
I had another question about international expansion. When I think about expanding internationally, I worry about, is HIMSS going to maintain their margins and keep manufacturing costs low? I just had this thought like, hey, everything's going to be more expensive in the UK. Do you think if they were to compound the similar medicines that they are doing now, I think you mentioned escitalopram was like 70 cents, so that's really cheap. So I was a little surprised it was that cheap there in the UK. Do you think they're going to be able to maintain that level of margin and make the same amount of money as they are in the States?
I believe so. So it may seem like things are expensive here in the UK, but medication is super cheap. I'll give you multiple examples. Sildenafil is under £1. My cost price. Escitalopram is like 70p. Metformin is like 80p. Propranolol. These are all like pennies. So if I'm able to maintain, if I'm selling it for £10, probably what, like an 80% margin or whatever, similar to HIMSS. So I'm sure HIMSS, if they're going to be manufacturing it directly, they'll be able to maintain high margins. And the reason why these medications have such high margins is because you can't just buy it online. Not everyone has a license to sell it. It needs to be through a doctor. That's why they're able to maintain such high margins.
Yeah, those are pretty good prices. It is a little bit more expensive from a manufacturing standpoint than the States. I think probably, I don't know, top of my head, maybe 50% more in terms of cost to produce those medicines. But overall, that's still a very low price point where you can still generate some good profit off of it. My other question was from a provider standpoint, do you think there's going to be a big market for UK-based physicians to sign up on the HIMSS platform and do this work? For me personally, it was a great lifestyle career to work in telemedicine. You know, you avoid all those issues, as you mentioned, with feeling stressed about a time limit. Is it going to be easy to attract high quality physicians to the platform?
I believe so, because as I mentioned, I have multiple doctors in my family, and the NHS overworks you. So you're seeing back-to-back patients. You have 10 minutes to see the patient and write your notes, and then you see the next patient, and you're often overworked. And HIMSS offers a telehealth service, so you could work from the comfort of your own home with less stress. So I think there'll be a lot of demand to work for HIMSS in the UK. And I'm not sure how much doctors get paid in the US, but in the UK, I would say an hourly rate of like £80.
Okay, so you think HIMSS would be able to hire some good quality physicians for £80 an hour?
Yes.
Okay. Can I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
I just had to Google what 80 pounds, UK pounds, was to dollars, and that's roughly about 103 US dollars an hour. And overall, I think that's lower than what they pay the US physicians now. They're paying probably 140 to $230 an hour. So I think that's good to see from a business standpoint that you can also offer a lower per hour rate to the UK physicians, you know.
And it may actually be cheaper for HIMSS because there's this new law in the UK where pharmacists like myself, they could prescribe, not for every condition, but for things like dermatology and ED and hair loss. They have the right to prescribe, and they have a lower hourly salary than doctors have. So theirs will probably range from 30 to 40 pounds an hour. So half what you pay a doctor. And they could practically do the same thing. But for more specialized conditions like mental health, I would say it's probably better to pass on to a proper physician.
Before we wrap, Q3 earnings is in 2 weeks. By the time this airs, I think we'll be roughly 1 week out. Just curious to hear what you're going to be listening for in the Q3 earnings call. What are you most excited about? And what should investors be on the lookout for?
So I think everyone's eyes are on GLP-1s and semaglutide, even though it's a small portion of their revenue. But as a pharmacist, the demand for GLP-1s is crazy. It's only increasing, and the shortage thing hasn't come into effect yet. So I'm sure they're going to beat revenue numbers. I would like to hear from Andrew Dudum. What's the plan if GLP-1s or semaglutide comes off the shortage list? Because would they have to all of a sudden stop all the patients on it? It would be great to get some clarity on that. And also a category expansion. So we saw that they hired someone that specializes in women's health and menopause, etc. Yes. It'll be great to get further clarity on that. And on the previous earnings call, or was it one of Andrew Dudum's interviews, he mentioned that they'll still be able to provide GLP-1s even if the shortage ends. Because I have an Ozempic pen here. These pens have a set dose. So that's one dose. But Andrew Dudum mentioned that if a patient experiences side effects with a specific dose, so 1 milligram or half a milligram, and if they need to take like half of that, like in between, so 0.75, then even if semaglutide is off the shortage list, they can still provide that medication for that patient.
Well, our guest today has been Sekander Amini. You can find him on Twitter at presidential01. He is also in the Hims House Discord. So if you have questions, follow-up questions about our show today, I would join Hims House. The link is on our Twitter profile. Sekander, thank you so much for coming on Hims House.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, Lewis, and Dr. H. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.